It's strange how the people closest to us are often the ones we understand the least. You wave to them. You share small talk across fences. You borrow tools, maybe even share meals. And over time, they stop being strangers. They become familiar, safe. But sometimes, that feeling is an illusion. Sometimes, the truth is buried just beneath the surface. Waiting. I didn't think much of him at first. Just another neighbor. The kind you acknowledge with a polite nod while checking your mail or taking out the trash. His name was Daniel Harper, Mid-50s, quiet, always polite. Lived next door with his wife and their teenage daughter. At least, that's what it used to be. Because one day, the daughter disappeared. No warning. No note. No explanation. Just gone. I still remember the night it happened. Flashing red and blue lights painted the entire street. Police cars lined both sides of the road like something out of a crime show. Officers knocked on every door, asking questions no one had answers to. When was the last time you saw her? Did you notice anything unusual? Did she have friends over? We all gave the same response. No, 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 because nothing was unusual. That was the terrifying part. Daniel and his wife, Margaret, were devastated. I mean truly shattered. Margaret stopped leaving the house almost entirely. Curtains drawn, lights dim, like she was trying to disappear along with her daughter. Daniel, he changed too. At first he was desperate, always outside, talking to officers, handing out flyers, knocking on doors himself. But as the weeks turned into months, that desperation turned into something else. Something quieter. Something hollow. Years passed. The police investigation slowly faded. The flyers disappeared. The questions stopped. And eventually, people stopped talking about it altogether. Except for one thing. Something I couldn't quite explain. Daniel never seemed to move on. Not in the way you'd expect. He didn't grieve like someone who had accepted loss. He lingered. Like he was waiting. Sometimes I'd catch him standing in his backyard, just staring at the ground. Not moving. Not doing anything. Just staring. At first, I told myself it was normal. People process grief differently, right? But then came the night everything changed. It started with something simple. A knock on my door. It was late. Too late for casual visits. I remember checking the clock, just past 11. When I opened the door, there he was. Daniel. Standing there with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey," he said quietly. "Sorry to bother you this late." Something about his voice felt off. Like he was trying too hard to sound normal. "Do you have a shovel I could borrow?" A shovel. At 11 p.m. I hesitated. Just for a second. But then I brushed it off. People do weird things. Maybe he was fixing something. Maybe he couldn't sleep. I didn't want to be that neighbor, the suspicious one. So I nodded. "Yeah, sure, give me a second." I went to the garage, grabbed my best shovel and handed it to him. He smiled again. "Too quickly." "Thanks, I'll bring it back tomorrow." But he didn't. The next morning, I looked out my window. The shovel wasn't in his yard. Neither was he. I figured he had already finished whatever he was doing and gone inside. No big deal. Except that night, I heard something. A dull, repetitive sound. Metal hitting dirt. At first, I thought it was just construction somewhere far off. But then I realized it was coming from right next door. I walked to my window, and that's when I saw him. Daniel, in his backyard, digging. The moonlight barely illuminated the scene, but it was enough. His movements were slow, heavy, deliberate. Like each shovel of dirt took effort. Like he had been doing it for a long time. But what really got to me wasn't the digging. It was the way he kept stopping. Every few seconds he'd pause and look around. Not casually, not absent-mindedly, but sharply. Quick glances toward neighboring houses, toward windows, toward me asterisk, like he was making sure no one was watching. I stepped back from the window instinctively. My heart started beating faster. Something wasn't right. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went over. I told myself I was just checking on him, that I was being a good neighbor. But deep down, I knew I was looking for answers. When I entered his backyard, he froze, completely still, like I had just caught him doing something he wasn't supposed to. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just came to see if you needed help." For a moment, he didn't respond. He just stared at me. Then suddenly, he rushed toward me. Too fast. Too aggressive. "No," he said sharply. "I've got it." I blinked. "Are you sure it looks like?" I said, "I've got it." His tone changed. Cold. Final. I'd never heard him speak like that before. Then he did something strange. He stepped between me and the hole, blocking my view. "I'd appreciate it if you left." Not asterisk asked asterisk. Told. Something in my chest tightened. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, okay." And I left. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I went back. Not into his yard. Not yet. But close enough to see over the fence. The hole was bigger now. Deeper. And at the bottom, there was something. At first, I thought it was just trash. A black plastic bag, partially buried. But then the wind shifted slightly, and the bag moved. Not because of the wind, because something inside it shifted. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just digging. This wasn't yard work. This was something else. Something darker. I stood there for what felt like minutes, maybe longer, trying to convince myself I was wrong, that there was a logical explanation. But deep down, I already knew. And then, I heard the back door creak open. My body reacted before my mind could. I ducked down, barely breathing. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. And then silence. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't even blink. Until finally, the footsteps faded. I ran back inside. Locked every door. Checked every window. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came the next morning. The hole was gone. Completely filled in. Like it had never existed. And the shovel, still missing. I told myself to forget it. To let it go. To stop imagining things. But that night, I looked out my window one more time. And there he was, standing inside his house. At the window, looking directly at me. Not blinking. Not moving. Just staring. And slowly, he reached up and closed the blinds. That was the moment I realized something. He knew. He knew I had seen. And whatever was buried in that backyard wasn't meant to be found. Mini cliffhanger ending, asterisk. But the truth didn't stay buried. Because 3 nights later, something started scratching. From beneath the ground, there's a certain kind of fear that doesn't come from what you see, but from what you asterisk hear asterisk. A sound in the night. Faint, unexplainable, persistent. At first you ignore it. Tell yourself it's nothing. The house settling. A stray animal. The wind. But then it happens again. And again. And again. Until ignoring it becomes impossible. 3 nights after I saw Daniel watching me from his window. It started. A scratching sound. Soft. Almost delicate. Like something gently dragging against wood. I woke up around 2 in the morning. No reason. No nightmare. Just awake. At first I didn't move. I just listened. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And then, there it was. SCRRR scratch asterisk. My eyes opened slowly. I stared at the ceiling. Heart starting to beat just a little faster. Probably a branch, I whispered to myself. Or a cat. But something didn't feel right. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from below. From the ground. I sat up in bed. Held my breath. Listened again. Nothing. I exhaled slowly. Shook my head. You're just imagining things. But just as I laid back down. Scratch asterisk. Louder this time. More urgent. My entire body went still. There was no denying it now. Something was under the house. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and slowly stood up. Every step toward the hallway felt heavier than the last. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet, each sound echoing louder than it should have. I made my way downstairs. The scratching grew clearer, sharper. It was coming from the living room. Specifically, from beneath the floor. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I was hearing. Then, it stopped. Just like that. Silence. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Nothing. I let out a shaky breath. Ran a hand through my hair. Okay, I muttered. That's enough for tonight. I turned off the light. Started heading back upstairs. And then, bang! I froze mid-step. That wasn't scratching. That was something hitting the underside of the floor. Hard, followed by scratch. Faster now. Desperate. Like something was trying to get out. My heart slammed against my chest. Every instinct told me to run. To get out of the house. To call someone. Anyone. But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew where this was leading. Daniel. The hole. The bag. Whatever had been buried. Wasn't gone. I slowly turned back toward the living room. Each step careful. Deliberate. The scratching continued. Relentless. I knelt down. Pressed my ear to the floor. And that's when I heard it. Not just scratching, but something else. A sound that didn't belong. A voice. Faint. Muffled. Broken. Help. I jerked back instantly. Fell onto the floor. My phone slipped from my hand, light spinning wildly across the walls. No, I whispered. No. This wasn't possible. There was no way. But I've heard it again. Please. My blood ran cold. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't a trick of the mind. There was someone down there. Alive. Or at least, trying to be. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing faster than it ever had. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved, straight for the front door. But as I reached for the handle, I stopped, because something hit me. Hard. If there was someone under my house, then how did they get there? And more importantly, who put them there? The answer came immediately. Daniel. My grip tightened on the doorknob. And then I realized something worse. If he put someone under my house, then he knew. He knew I was watching. He knew I had seen the hole. And now, I knew too much. A chill ran down my spine. Slowly, I turned around. And that's when I saw it. The back door, slightly open. I was sure I had locked it. Absolutely sure. But now, it was ajar. Just enough to let someone in. Or out. The scratching beneath the floor stopped. Silence filled the house once again. But this time, it felt different. Heavier. Like I wasn't alone anymore. I took a step back. Then another. My breathing shallow. My chest tight. And then, a sound behind me. A soft creak. From the hallway. I turned slowly. Every muscle in my body screaming at me not to. And there, standing in the darkness, was Daniel. He didn't move. Didn't speak. He just stood there, watching me. The faint light from outside barely illuminated his face. But I could see his eyes. Wide. Unblinking. Empty. You, I whispered. He tilted his head slightly. Almost curious. Like he was studying me. You weren't supposed to hear that. His voice was calm. Too calm. I took another step back. My hand blindly reaching for anything. A weapon. A phone. Something. You should have just minded your own business, he continued. The words weren't angry. That's what made them worse. They were disappointed. Like I had broken some unspoken rule. I tried to keep it quiet, he said softly. I really did. The air felt suffocating. What did you do? I managed to ask. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, he smiled. A slow, unnatural smile. They never really leave, you know. My stomach dropped. What? He took a step forward. People think disappearance means gone. Another step. But that's not true. Another. They're always somewhere. My back hit the wall. And sometimes, he whispered, they're closer than you think. A faint sound echoed from beneath the floor again. Weak. Help. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, as if savoring it, then looked back at me. And for the first time, there was something in his expression. Not emptiness, not grief, but something far worse. Satisfaction. Mini cliffhanger ending, asterisk. And just as I opened my mouth to scream, the lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the room. And somewhere beneath my feet, something started screaming. Darkness has a way of changing things. It distorts reality, turns familiar spaces into something hostile, dangerous. And in that moment, standing in my own home, surrounded by nothing but pitch-black silence, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't my house anymore. It was his. The lights hadn't just gone out. They had been asterisk cut asterisk. The kind of darkness that followed wasn't natural. No faint glow from electronics. No streetlight leaking through the curtains. Nothing. Just black. And then, that scream. Not from Daniel. Not from me. From beneath the floor. High-pitched. Broken. Desperate. It echoed through the house like something out of a nightmare. Like a voice that had been buried for too long, finally tearing its way back to the surface. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like the air itself had thickened. "Do you hear it?" Daniel whispered. His voice was closer now. Too close. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My body was locked in place, frozen between instinct and fear. "They always start like that," he continued softly. Confused, scared. A shiver ran through me. Always. The word echoed in my mind. Not asterisk once asterisk. Not an accident. This had happened before. My hand slowly tightened around my phone, still clutched in my palm. I didn't think. I just acted. I tapped the screen. Light exploded into the darkness. And for a split second, everything was visible. Daniel stood just a few feet away. Closer than I thought. Closer than I asterisk wanted. His face illuminated. In that smile, it hadn't faded. Not even a little. He didn't flinch from the light. Didn't blink. He just stared. "Ah," he said quietly. "There you are." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. Not surprised. Not angry. Relieved. Like he had been waiting for this moment. I stepped back quickly, raising the phone between us. "Stay away from me." My voice trembled. He tilted his head again, studying me. "You're scared," he said. It wasn't a question. "Good." The word hit me like a slap. And then, he moved. Vast. I barely had time to react before he lunged forward. I stumbled back, slipping on the hardwood floor, crashing into the edge of the couch. My phone flew from my hand, skidding across the room. The light spun wildly before settling face down. Darkness swallowed everything again. I scrambled, trying to get up. But then I heard it. Not footsteps. Not movement. Breathing. Right in front of me. Slow. Controlled. He was standing over me. "You should have stayed out of it," he said quietly. My hands fumbled blindly across the floor, searching for anything. Anything at all. And then, my fingers brushed against something solid. The leg of a lamp. Without thinking, I grabbed it and swung. There was a dull asterisk crack. A grunt. And then silence. I didn't wait. I scrambled to my feet and ran. Straight for the front door. This time I didn't hesitate. I yanked it open and bolted outside. Cold night air hit my face like a shockwave. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I ran across the street. Pounded on the nearest door. "Help!" I shouted. "Someone please." Lights flicked on inside. Footsteps approached. And for the first time that night, I felt something close to relief. But it didn't last. Because when I glanced back at my house, the front door was still open. And in the darkness beyond it, I could see him. Standing there. Watching me. Still. Silent. Like he wasn't worried. Like he knew something I didn't. The door behind me opened. A voice called out. "What's going on?" I turned quickly, words tumbling over themselves. "There's someone in my house," He broke in. There's someone under the floor. I sounded insane. I knew I did. But I didn't care. Call the police, I said. Please. They did. And within minutes, the street was alive again. Flashing lights, police cars, voices, déjà vu. But this time, it was my house. Officers moved in carefully, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. I stood outside shaking, barely able to process what was happening. One officer approached me. Sir, we need you to stay back. I nodded, couldn't speak. Minutes passed, maybe longer. And then, one of the officers stepped back outside. His expression, it wasn't what I expected. Not urgency, not alarm, confusion. There's no one in there, he said. My heart dropped. What? We checked every room, he continued. Backyard too, no sign of forced entry, no sign of anyone else. That's not possible, I said quickly. He was right there, I saw him, he was. Sir, the officer interrupted gently. There's no one inside. My head spun. No, you don't understand. There's someone under the floor. That got their attention. A few officers exchanged glances. Under the floor. I nodded rapidly. Yes, there's a voice. I heard it. Someone's down there. Silence. Then one of them spoke into his radio. Moments later, more officers entered the house. This time, they brought tools. It took them nearly 20 minutes to find it. A section of the living room floor. Slightly different from the rest. Barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. They pried it open slowly, carefully, and as the wood lifted, a smell hit. Rotten, heavy, unmistakable. I turned away immediately, gagging. But the officers, they kept looking. And then, one of them said something I'll never forget. Oh my God. The others gathered around. Flashlights focused downward. No one spoke for a moment. Then finally, there's more than one. My blood ran cold. More than one. That word echoed louder than anything else that night. Not one victim. Multiple. Buried. Hidden. Right beneath my feet. For how long? How many? And then, another voice. Faint. Weak. Help. One of the officers snapped to attention. Wait, did you hear that? They leaned closer. Silence. Then again. Please. Alive. Someone down there. Was still alive. Everything erupted into motion. Get medical now. Careful, don't collapse the structure. They worked fast, carefully removing debris. And then, they found her. A girl, barely conscious, covered in dirt, eyes half open, but alive. Somehow, alive. As they pulled her out, she clung weakly to one of the officers, mumbling something over and over again. It's okay, he said. You're safe now. But she shook her head. No, she whispered. Her voice cracked. He's still here. The officer frowned. What do you mean? Her eyes shifted, slowly, toward me. And for a moment, I felt something I couldn't explain. Fear, not from what she said, but from the way she looked at me. Like she wasn't seeing me. Like she was seeing someone else. Someone behind me. Mini cliffhanger ending, And as I slowly turned around, there was no one there. But the front door of my house was wide open again. Fear doesn't always come from what you see. Sometimes it comes from what doesn't make sense. Because when something defies logic, your mind starts filling in the blanks. And what it creates is often far worse than reality. I stood there frozen, staring at the open front door of my house. No one had gone in. No one had come out. At least no one we saw. The officers were still inside, still working, still pulling pieces of something terrible out from beneath the floor. And yet, that door was open. A cold breeze drifted out from the darkness beyond it. Slow, deliberate, like the house itself was breathing. "Sir," I snapped back. The officer beside me looked concerned. "You need to step further back." I nodded slowly, but my eyes didn't leave the doorway. Because something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. The girl they pulled out was rushed into an ambulance, her weak voice fading as the door slammed shut. But her last words, "They didn't leave me. He's still here." I told myself she was confused, traumatized. She had been buried underground, barely alive. Of course she wasn't thinking clearly. But then, why did it feel like she wasn't talking about Daniel? Why did it feel like she was warning me? The police eventually cleared the house. Again, no one inside. No signs of Daniel. No forced entry. No exit. Nothing, except for what was under the floor. They found 3 bodies. 3, all in different stages of decay. All buried beneath my living room. And somehow, one survivor. The questions came fast. Too fast. Did you know the suspect? Have you had any prior issues with him? When did you first notice unusual behavior? I answered everything. Every detail. Every moment. The shovel. The digging. The night I saw the bag. The voice beneath the floor. Everything. But as I spoke, I noticed something strange. The officers weren't reacting the way I expected. There was no shock, no urgency, no sense of revelation. Just quiet confusion. Finally, one of them spoke. "Sir, are you sure about the identity of this man?" I frowned. "What do you mean? You said his name is Daniel Harper." "Yes." Another glance between them. "And then, there's no record of anyone by that name living next door." Silence. The world seemed to tilt slightly. "What?" "The property next door," the officer continued, "has been vacant for over 8 years." My heart skipped. "That's not possible," I said quickly. "I've lived here for 5. He's been there the entire time. Him and his wife and their daughter." "Sir," his voice was firm now, "there is no registered family living there." I shook my head. No, I've seen them. I've talked to him. He borrowed my shovel. That doesn't prove residency." The words hit harder than they should have. "Come with me." Before I could respond, they were already moving toward the house next door. Daniel's house. Or at least, the house I thought was his. The front yard was overgrown. Grass too tall. Bushes untrimmed. That wasn't right. I had seen him out there before. Maintaining it. Cleaning it. Hadn't I? The porch creaked as we stepped up. One of the officers knocked. No response. He tried the handle. Unlocked. The door slowly swung open. And what we saw inside didn't make sense. Dust. Everywhere. Thick layers covering furniture. Floors. Walls. Like no one had lived there in years. The air was stale. Heavy. Rotten. This place has been abandoned, one officer muttered. I stepped inside slowly, my mind racing. No, this isn't right. I moved deeper into the house, each step stirring dust into the air. The living room. Empty. The kitchen. Unused. No food. No dishes. Nothing. And then, I saw it. On the wall. A photograph. Old. Faded. But clear enough. A family of 3. A man. A woman. And a teenage girl. My chest tightened. That's them, I whispered. The officers stepped closer, examining the photo. One of them frowned. You recognize these people? Yes, I said. That's Daniel, that's Margaret, and that's their daughter. Silence. Then, that's not Daniel Harper. I looked at him, confused. That's Michael Reeves ***. The name meant nothing to me. He owned this house, the officer continued. 8 years ago. My stomach dropped. Owned it. The officer nodded slowly. There was an incident. Every nerve in my body tensed. What kind of incident? He hesitated. Just for a moment. Then, the daughter went missing. The air left my lungs. Michael claimed she ran away, he continued. But the case was never solved. My heart pounded louder. And then, the officer's expression darkened. A year later, Michael disappeared too. Silence. What about the wife? I asked. She was found. A pause. In the basement. My blood turned to ice. Dead. The room felt smaller. Colder. Cause of death, I whispered. The officer looked directly at me. Undetermined. A long silence followed. My mind struggled to piece it together. The missing daughter. The dead wife. The vanished father. And now, bodies under my house. A survivor claiming. He's still here. No, I muttered. No, that doesn't make sense. But deep down, it did. More than I wanted to admit. Because suddenly, everything felt connected. Too connected. And then, one of the officers called out from another room. You need to see this. We moved quickly into what looked like a bedroom. And there, on the floor, was something freshly disturbed. Not dust-covered. Not old. New. The officer knelt down, brushed it aside, and revealed a shovel. My shovel, covered in dirt, still damp. Used. Recently. My hands started shaking. That's impossible, I whispered. Because if this house had been abandoned for 8 years, then who was using it? Mini cliffhanger ending, ***. And just as that thought settled in, from somewhere deep inside the house, a door slowly creaked open. On its own. There are moments in life when everything changes. Not slowly, not over time, but all at once. A single sound, a single realization, a single truth that shatters everything you thought you knew. That door creaking open. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But in that silence, it felt deafening. Every officer in the room froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Just the faint echo of wood dragging against wood. as the door, somewhere deeper in the house, opened. "Did anyone check that room?" one officer whispered. Another shook his head slowly. "I thought this place was clear." "So did I. But clearly, we were wrong." A flashlight beam cut through the dusty air. Then another. Then another. "Stay behind us," someone said. I didn't argue. I couldn't. My legs felt weak, my chest tight, because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't over. It had never been over. We moved down the hallway. Slowly, carefully. Every step stirred up years of dust. Every breath tasted stale. And with each second, that feeling grew stronger. The one I had been trying to ignore since the beginning. We weren't alone. The open door came into view. At the end of the hallway, slightly ajar, darkness spilling out from inside like ink. One officer approached cautiously, gun raised. He pushed the door open fully. The hinges groaned, and the light poured in, revealing nothing. An empty room, bare walls, no furniture, no windows, just darkness. But something felt wrong. "Clear?" one officer asked. The other stepped inside, slowly scanning the room. "Clear," but his voice hesitated, like he didn't believe it either. And then I noticed it. The floor, different, just like mine, slightly uneven, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. But it was too late. One of the officers had already seen it too. "Hold on." He crouched down, pressed his hand against the wood, then knocked. Thud. Hollow. The room went silent. "Get tools," he said. And just like before, they started prying it open. Piece by piece. The wood resisted at first, then gave way. And as the panel lifted, that smell returned. Stronger this time. Thicker. Older. I turned away again. But this time, I couldn't block it out. Because what came next was worse than anything before. Not one body, not two, but many. Stacked, layered, hidden, like something had been collecting them. Over time, years, decades maybe. No one spoke, no one moved, until finally, one officer whispered, "How long has this been going on?" No one had an answer. And then, from the far corner of the room, a sound, soft, almost playful, a giggle. Every head snapped in that direction. Flashlights shifted, and there, in the corner, stood a figure, small, still, a girl, covered in dirt, hair hanging over her face, bare feet against the cold floor. No one moved, no one breathed, because we all recognized her. From the photograph, the missing daughter, the one who disappeared 8 years ago. But that wasn't possible. She hadn't aged, not a day. She slowly lifted her head and smiled, a wide, unnatural smile. "Daddy said you'd come," she whispered. My blood turned to ice. One of the officers stepped forward. Carefully. "It's okay," he said gently. "We're here to help you." She tilted her head, just like Daniel used to. "No," she said softly. "You're too late." The temperature in the room dropped. Suddenly, Violently, breath turned visible, lights flickered, and then the door behind us slammed shut. Gunshots echoed instantly. Chaos erupted. Get back. What the hell? Open the door. But it wouldn't budge. Locked. Sealed. Like something was holding it from the other side. Or the inside. The girl began to laugh. Not loud. Not wild. But quiet. Controlled. Like she had been waiting for this moment. For so long, she whispered. The lights went out again. Complete darkness. But this time, we weren't blind, because something else filled the room. Shapes, moving, shifting in the dark. Dozens of them. Whispers surrounded us. Voices overlapping. Crying, begging, screaming. They're still here. They never left. He keeps them. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears. But it didn't help, because the voices weren't just around me. They were inside my head. And then, a new voice. Calm, familiar, right behind me. You should have stayed out of it. I turned slowly. And there, standing in the darkness, was Daniel. Or what used to be him. His face twisted, eyes hollow, skin pale. But that smile, still there. They don't like being disturbed, he said softly. The shadows moved closer. They were at peace. A hand grabbed my arm. Cold, rotting. I screamed. They were quiet, he continued. Another hand. Then another. They were mine. The girl stepped closer. You woke them up, she whispered. Everything happened at once. The shadows surged forward. The voices reached a deafening pitch. The air itself felt like it was collapsing. And then, silence. I woke up in a hospital bed. Bright lights. Machines beeping. My body felt heavy. Numb. An officer sat beside me. You're lucky to be alive, he said. My throat was dry. What happened? He hesitated. Then, we found you unconscious in that house. My heart raced. The others. A pause. They didn't make it. The words hit like a hammer. All of them, I whispered. He nodded. The house collapsed. Collapsed. That was the explanation. That was the official story. But I knew better. Because as I lay there, trying to process everything, I noticed something. On my arm. A mark. Faint, but clear. Finger-shaped. Like something had grabbed me and hadn't let go. The officer stood up. We're still investigating, he said. But for now, get some rest. He left the room, and I was alone. Or at least, I thought I was. Because a few seconds later, I heard it. Faint, almost impossible to notice, but unmistakable. SCRRR scratch asterisk. Coming from beneath the hospital bed. Some neighbors wave at you. Some watch you. And some never leave.